We can get ourselves started here. Maybe this is such a casual crowd, we might just figure out kind of who we got here. How many of you are involved with voice and voice assistants, like building apps and skills and things like that for things like Alexa and Google Home and Cortana and Siri and that sort of stuff? Okay, a few of you. How many of you are involved with AI and machine learning in general? Oh, a bunch more. That's awesomeness. Would any of you classify yourselves as data scientists? Maybe a few of them? Not yet? Okay, because if you were, you'd probably be gainfully employed in other ways. What else should we ask? Yeah. How many of you are with like technology vendors, building products for market? Okay, a few. That's this side. That's the groom side. All right. And how many of you, again, the rest of you are like end users, implementers, adopters, that kind of stuff? Okay, cool. Well, let's explain a little bit kind of why we're here and why we're presenting this, because this is going to be interesting, I think, for a lot of you who are trying to actually make these kind of apps work. So I'm Ron Schmelzer.
I'm Kathleen Walch. We're both principal analyst and managing partners at Cognilytica, which is an AI-focused research and advisory firm. We also are hosts of the popular AI Today podcast, which is now a top 5 AI-related podcast. We go over various use cases in different industries, as well as the government. And in addition to that, we also write for a number of publications. We contribute to Forbes, Tech Target, CTO Vision, and Cognitive World.
Right. And about a year ago, we were working as analysts. We were spending a lot of time with these vendors that all are pushing their voice assistant devices out, which of course it begs a lot of questions like, what's the end goal? What's the reason? Why is the voice assistant the primary vehicle for getting things out into the market? And there's lots of good answers, right? Because people like to interact. They don't necessarily like to interact with visual user interfaces, sometimes for many good reasons. They like to interact with voice interfaces. It brings up a really funny story. As mentioned, we were just in Switzerland, and we're saying, like, when you're at Thanksgiving, you have your hands in the turkey, and you'd like to ask a question about, like, how long should I put this turkey in the oven? They all just looked at us like,
what's
why?
Thanksgiving?
And they're like, why is your hand in a turkey? I'm like, wow, cultural reference. So, and then they also said, what's Amazon Prime, which is interesting because I had thought that Amazon Prime had worldwide penetration, but apparently it doesn't. Not in Switzerland and a bunch of other places, no Amazon Prime, which brings up a whole bunch of other questions. So about a year ago, we were looking at all these use cases for voice assistants, and we're like, well, in the places that people want to use these voice assistants, are they actually capable of providing the sort of guidance that we want them to? And that's when we started, like, let's give these voice assistants a bit of a test.
Right.
So basically, in our voice assistant benchmark, one of the things we realized is that the intelligence of the voice assistant has very little to do with the voice interface, which is, can it understand what you're saying? It has a lot to do with what's behind the voice interface. That's basically the AI, machine learning, and natural language processing system that can understand what you're trying to say. So
right. Well, and actually, we decided that we were going to take the voice out of it in general because we just assumed that they'd all be able to understand. So we ended up using Amazon Polly to make sure that it was a consistent voice across all of the different voice assistants that we ended up testing, because we said we're not testing it on that, we're testing it on the back-end knowledge.
Right. So before I play this video, because actually some of you actually are familiar with this video, I don't want to play it if you've all seen it. If that video in the bottom left corner with the Scotsman trying to talk to you, like, you guys are all familiar with that one, the videos? A few of you? Well, maybe I got half the head, so I'll play it just because it's fun, and then we'll go from there.
What's the buttons?
Oh no, they installed voice recognition technology in this lift. I heard about this.
Voice recognition technology in a lift in Scotland. You ever tried voice recognition technology?
No.
They don't do Scottish accents.
11.
Could you please repeat that?
11.
11. 11.
11.
Could you please repeat that?
11.
Whose idea was this? You need to try an American accent. 11. 11.
That sounds Irish, not American.
What, doesn't it? 11.
Where in America is that? Dublin?
I'm sorry. Could you please repeat that?
Try an English accent, right? 11. 11.
You for the same part of England as Dick Van Dyke?
Listen, yours then, smart ass.
Please speak slowly and clearly.
Smart ass.
11.
I'm sorry. Could you please repeat that?
11. If you don't understand the lingo, away back home to your own country.
Ooh, is that talk now, is it? Away back to your own country?
Oh, don't start, Mr. Bleeding Heart. How can you be racist to a lift?
Please speak slowly and clearly.
11. 11. 11. 11.
You're just saying it the same way.
I want to keep saying it until I understand Scottish, alright?
So it's a little funny example, and I think part of it, obviously, this is making fun of just the basics of voice recognition and understanding accents. But it's interesting that it's kind of become sort of like the cultural understanding that these voice assistants are non-intelligent. So poking fun at a voice assistant is sort of like, oh, we all understand what that means. So that's sort of like the elephant in the room here, making fun of Dumbo a little bit, and that they're having trouble even answering more basic questions, even if you take the accent out of it. Let me move on here.
Now, some people like to call these smart speakers, some people call these intelligent assistants. We think that smart speakers actually downplays their ability and their role and where a lot of these companies envision them going. Smart speakers make it sound like they'll just play music and maybe do a few other things, you know, an interactive alarm clock, play music. But so we don't call them smart speakers, we call them intelligent assistants. And we think it's important to note that because of what these companies hopefully see these going as an end game.
Right. And if you sort of read between the lines of how Amazon and Google and Microsoft and Samsung and Apple and all these companies are portraying these devices, they basically want to have you use them as like intelligent assistants. Right. You know, use them as sort of an adjunct to your daily life, and
also within your work setting as well. Use them as an adjunct to your work day.
Right. And I think that's part of the conflict, because to one community that's basically just looking at it as like just turning on the lights and playing the music, these things are pretty good at that. But for the other part, which is basically having it provide that role as the intelligent system, we're actually a pretty far way away from that reality.
So about a year ago, like Ron said, we introduced our first voice assistant benchmark. We benchmarked 4 different platforms. We did Alexa, Siri, Google Home, and Cortana. We wanted to make this very transparent, so we published all the results online as well as recorded with video all of the questions and answers, so that in case there was any questions from any of the vendors or people who wanted to recreate these, they could go on and check it out. And actually, I think we'll get into one. There was a question because Cortana was actually provided a very interesting answer to a pretty basic question.
Right, I think we got that for you. And so basically we had these series of 10 questions that we asked all of the, it's a bank of 10 questions, 10 categories of questions with 10 questions in each category, plus a set of 10 calibration questions just to make sure that we got our test right. And these questions got increasingly harder and harder. And you'll kind of see what they are. And some of them actually are even difficult for humans in some ways. But these are the kinds of things that you'd want these voice assistants to be able to do. And these categories, I will show each of these categories here. And the responses, we basically graded the response. So a category 0 response was of when a voice assistant came back and said, I don't understand your question, or I can't help you, or please rephrase that, or something like that. A category 1 response is when it came back with the completely unexpected answer, so basically just got it wrong. Mm-hmm. And then category 2 was basically the word salad. It basically goes, well, here's a really, really, really long answer, so hopefully you human can sort of figure out what the right answer is among this. And of course, category 3 is just straight up got it correct. And as Kathleen mentioned, we used a voice to prevent any issues of Scottish accents.
Yeah. We had a few of our interns do it, and not all of them were native English speakers. So we said, you know what? We're going to take that language barrier out of the equation and keep it consistent.
Right. So this is sort of calibration. We figured everybody should get these wrong. We basically asked it a bunch of questions that every assistant should get right, and we also asked it a bunch of questions that we thought every assistant should get wrong, just so that we make sure that our test was calibrated. And so here is Cortana answering the question, what is 10 plus 10?
Alexa, what is 10 plus 10?
10 plus 10 equals 20.
That's the show device if you haven't seen that one. Or is it the spot?
Hey Cortana, What is 10 plus 10?
According to Wikipedia.org, 1010 is a charity that enables people to take practical action on climate change
That doesn't sound
and
right.
combines these local actions to inspire a more ambitious approach to the issue at every level of society.
Hey Cortana, what is 10 plus 10?
10 plus 10 is 20.
All right.
So we used a different voice, and it was able to pick it up on that voice.
Hey Cortana,
but we shouldn't have
what
had to
is
do
10
that.
plus 10?
You'll see it fails on that one too. So it
Yeah.
fails on half of the poly voices, which are supposed to be standard. So what does that tell for AI machine learning data science people in the audience? What does that tell you? That tells you that they trained their speech recognition model on a much more limited set of voices than the Alexa. And also we also tested Google Home and Siri, and they both did not fail here. So we sent this to, we tweeted this. And what happened when we tweeted this?
Yeah, so we sent this to Microsoft, and of course they got back to us and said, we don't believe you. So that's why we had it on video, and we sent it to them, and they said that their engineers were not recreating the same answers that we got, but we clearly had it on video.
That's why we have it on video.
Right.
All right. So the next category of question is we basically try to figure out, can these devices answer very basic concepts? And we have like a few of them. Like, for example, is a ton of unit of measurement?
Right.
How much does a ton of peas weigh? Right. The standard kids question. Right.
And so you may say, well, that's a silly question. I'm never going to be asking that. But if you're ordering mulch, for example, or you work with very large volumes of weight, it's nice to know that these systems are able to handle that. Also, if you're building a skill on top of one of these devices and it can't handle, you know, what a ton is or what a pound is or what a kilo is, you need to know that before you build your skill on top of that.
And also, we're asking sort of a little bit of an interesting question where we're sort of giving the answer in the question, right? So how much does a pound of peas weigh? Well, we just said it was a pound. So the question is, does the system understand that we're providing an answer in the question? Mm-hmm. And well, we got some interesting responses. You see a lot of those red bars each one of those bars is the graph of the various different assistants and their categories of response. Green meaning getting it right, red meaning getting it really wrong, yellow meaning irrelevant, and I think orange.
Yeah, the yellow and orange both did not provide the right answer. There was just different categories of not providing it right. So one isn't better than two. We just decided to use numerical instead of letters or characters, whatever else.
But there's an awful lot of red here where there shouldn't be. So let's play Alexa, and I think it's Google Home answering this question.
Alexa, how much does a ton of peas weigh? Alexa, how much does a ton of peas weigh?
Alexa, how much does a ton of peas weigh?
Just refuse to answer that.
Alexa, how much does a pound of peas weigh?
1 pound of any material equals 1 pound.
Huh, interesting.
Alexa, is a ton a unit of measurement?
Sorry, I don't know that one.
Alexa, is a pound a unit of measurement?
No, 1 pound is not a unit of measurement.
Huh. All right. Something is going on there. It doesn't understand tons. It understands pounds. It understands kilos. It doesn't understand. Like you have to kind of, when you're building a skill, be aware of its obviously bias, data bias, right?
Right. Be aware of its data bias. Be aware of its limitations as well.
All right. So let's crank it up a notch. Oop, keep doing that. Sorry. Comparison questions. All right.
All right, so with this, we wanted to ask comparison questions. So what's bigger, an ant or a tiger? And we tried to make these fairly obvious so that, to humans, we know, we're not asking like, oh, this bird or this bird, what's bigger? No, we made it clear, an ant or a tiger. And we wanted to see if these voice assistants understood these basic concepts.
Right. And sort of like the enterprise, there's always an enterprise reason, a business reason for all these questions, right? The first one was like, make sure that the system you're building a skill for has an understanding of the basic concepts that you're trying to build your skill for. This one is basically if you're trying to build, let's say, a scheduling app, and you're like, oh, will this train take longer to get there than to drive, for example, or like, is this meeting longer than the amount of time I have this conference room set up for? These are like very basic questions. And it's interesting that the system, that you're asking to do the second order thing, which is figure out the measurement that you want and then compare it to another measurement and see if it can give you an answer for that. So the failure rates are quite interesting here.
Alexa, what is the nearest star?
Oh, I'm going to pause it. Stop.
Yeah, I was going to say. So we ask a lot of humans this question as well, so let's ask the audience.
Audience,
What is the nearest star to the Earth?
The sun.
Okay, great.
Very good.
A lot of people say the moon.
I don't know why. Our Chinese audience didn't quite get that right. Of course, and some people might be tempted to say Alpha Centauri because they might think, or Proxima Centauri.
Less people said that than the moon.
The scientists among us.
The
Okay.
nearest star is Sun.
Okay, Alexa got it right.
Hey Google, what is the nearest star? Alpha Centauri. Here's a summary from the website space.com. The two main stars are Alpha Centauri A and Alpha Centauri B. They are an average of 4.3 light years from Earth. The third star is Proxima Centauri.
All right, so you got the idea. And there's a lot of them that are the same thing, like comparing sizes of animals. None of them really got them right and things like that. So, okay.
Then we decided to test cause and effect. So what happens when ice melts? Or if you break something into two parts, how many parts are there? And we thought it was important to ask these series of questions because we wanted to see if it understood, the next step and what would happen if you did something.
Right, and so you could think, for example, if you have we're always thinking about cooking, because first of all, I love to cook, and Kathleen and I like to cook, but it's also like a very easy explanation. So
Yeah,
you'd be
for
like,
everybody to understand.
okay, well, if you gave me the recipe for this, what if I put this in the refrigerator? What if I do this? And you'd want the systems to provide a little bit of help there. Otherwise, if you're building an app, let's say if you're building an Alexa skill or a Google Home, so you have to encode all this knowledge in because the platform doesn't have any of this cooked into it. Not to play on words there.
Alexa, what happens when you melt ice?
I don't know that one. Hey Cortana, what happens when you melt ice?
According to Answers.com, as ice melts, its framework collapses and it becomes more dense as it turns to liquid water.
Yeah, it's a long about way of getting there. But
Yeah.
I figured out what you were trying to ask, which is great. So obviously, Cortana, as you start looking at our benchmark, and if you look at our data, you'll see that Cortana has been trained much better on scientific and medical and that sort of stuff.
Right.
So
And this also brings up a good point because we've started to see voice assistants in more situational settings, such as hospital rooms, for example. And if a patient is using it to ask specific questions like, what will happen if I take Tylenol in my current condition? And it doesn't know that, or it provides a wrong answer, that can be potentially deadly.
Right, and actually it is true. There was an article recently about how many hospitals now are putting voice assistants into patient
Into
care
patient rooms.
room. Some of it's really simple, like change the television channel and don't call the assistant to do those. Really
Also with bed settings, it can lift the bed up or down. It can turn the lights on and off depending on the state that the patient is in. They may not be able to move around. So this helps them feel a little bit more in control of everything.
yeah, but just case
So
in point.
doing like basic voice commands with your device, okay. But when you start asking it questions that require a little bit more intelligence, then this is where you need to know its limitations.
Unless you're Scottish, of course, in which case don't
Then
ask
it
it.
will not understand
Don't
you at
ask
all.
it to raise the bed to 11. You'll be in trouble. All right. So so the next thing is basically, do these systems do they have capability to do any sort of logic or reasoning? And some things like well, we can explain some of those things before I play the video. Some of the sample questions.
Sure. So we asked, is a dead person alive? Or can you eat toxic food? How many eggs are there in a box of a dozen eggs? So we decided to ask these questions to see if it really understood reasoning and logic. Why this is important, if you're trying to build a skill on one of these devices, you need to know its limitations. Again, like we said, especially in a medical situation, for example, if you say, can I eat this particular berry or whatever, and if it doesn't know that it's poison and then you eat it, that's not good.
Mm-hmm. So let's see what happens.
Siri, is a dead person alive?
No, dead is not alive.
Alexa, is a dead person alive?
No, alive is not true of at least one dead person.
Good logic. That's an actual
Hey
logic
Google,
answer.
is a dead person alive?
My apologies. I don't understand.
There you go.
Siri, how many eggs are there in a box of a dozen eggs?
Okay, I found this on the web for how many eggs are there in a box of a dozen eggs.
Thank you for the search, Siri.
Alexa, how many eggs are there in a box of a dozen eggs?
Here's something I found from the article Egg as Food on Wikipedia. In 2009, an estimated 62.1 million metric tons of eggs were produced worldwide from a total laying flock of approximately 6.4 billion hens. Did that answer your question?
No.
Yeah. No.
How many eggs are there in a box of a dozen eggs?
On the website Quora.com, they say, there are variations, but these are what you typically find. 100 eggs, which are 5 flats of 20-count eggs. 180 eggs, 15 dozen, which are 6 flats of 30-count eggs.
This is the word salad, right? Mm-hmm. What is that all about?
Right.
I would much rather have a no.
So we were expecting that to be a fairly straightforward answer, and so we were a little surprised with the results that we got.
So in this next category, we're like, okay, let's think about the situations in which we're going to use these devices the most, right? You know, like, okay, well, like, you know, I'm like running around, I'm like, you know, hey Alexa, I'm going to trigger a device, but hey Alexa, you know, where can I get some stamps? You know, Alexa, my kid's asking me this question, what's blue plus yellow? Things like that.
And now you may say, okay, well, I'm in the house, I could look it up, but say you have a sales team and they're on the road and they want to use these devices to be able to pull up relevant information. If it's not answering these basic questions, it's not very helpful to them.
Right, so let's see what we got here. Had an interesting mixed response if you look at the bar charts. They didn't all respond equally well here.
Alexa, where can I buy stamps?
Based on your zip code settings, here are a few top-rated ones. Morocco stamped concrete. Artistic stamped concrete.
Didn't quite understand
Stamp
stamp.
gallery.
Right.
Stamper electric.
Hey Google, where can I buy stamps?
A few nearby stores have that. First, there is Office Depot, Baltimore, 6.6 miles away. They have USPS Forever stamps, booklet of 20 postage stamps. Stamp design may vary for $10. Would you like to hear more results?
There you go. Now that's a response.
You can also add it to your shopping list or get directions to the store.
That's nice. Add to shopping.
Yeah.
list.
Now there's a little backstory to this question, which is that Amazon and the U.S. Postal Service are kind of frenemies. So you're kind of familiar with the dynamic that's happening there, and that Amazon doesn't really want to be selling U.S. Postal Service products, and U.S. Postal Service doesn't really want to be selling Amazon products, but they kind of are cooperating. There's a whole story about how the USPS actually has like the most accurate geo-located database of mailboxes, like their physical location. They know exactly where every mailbox is. So even if you have a really long driveway, they'll know that the mailbox is at the end of the driveway. You know, this obviously helps for package delivery. And Amazon wants that data set so bad, and the USPS government's like, we're never going to sell that data set. First of all, they're not in the business of selling data, and second of all, we're not going to provide that access. So kind of an interesting little dynamic there. That's the background to that little part of the story.
Yeah.
All right, emotions.
All right. So, you know, we know that humans have a better emotional IQ than machines. But in order for them to become truly intelligent, we need to start helping them learn how to understand emotions, especially if, you know, depending on the situation that you're going to be using it in. Customer service, for example. So we asked questions such as, should I send a congratulations notice for my friend's funeral? Or when you yell, are you loud? And are friends people who like each other. So these are basic questions to understand relationships and dynamic and emotions.
Right. And as Kathleen mentioned, like really the biggest applications in the customer service setting, when you're trying to build chatbots or voice assistant bots that are supposed to operate autonomously, and customers irate or confused or overly enthusiastic
Or sad or stressed out. I mean, there's maybe they just got in a car accident, for
And the
example.
interesting thing is, like, AI and machine learning is actually being applied to pretty good use in sentiment analysis. This is sort of like your typical sentiment analysis thing. But also you want to sort of key off on words they use. So like, for example, people saying like, I'm frustrated, or like, man, you asked me that question 5 times. These are sentiment analysis of like not happiness. So let's see if these devices have been hopefully trained to key on these things.
Alexa, should I send a congratulations notice for my friend's funeral?
I'm not sure.
It's a long pause. Did I not have the cut on this one? Sorry about that. Hello. I think I might have inserted the wrong. Well,
Alexa, when you yell, are you loud?
Sorry, I don't know that one.
so there's a lot of that. That video. There's one
You can
that
see there's mostly reds
there's
in
one,
there.
like, and the one Google is the
you
one that
moved
gets the
to
one.
the other
Yeah, I moved the
side.
next one. Google is the one that basically gets the emotional IQ ones generally better than the other ones. So, but they're all kind of not the greatest at this. So this is kind of an area of continued work.
We also decided to test if these devices had intuition and common sense. So we always joke that humans don't always have common sense, but but and Ron always says it's neither common nor sense. But in general, we wanted to see, if these devices understood certain things. So are parents older than their children? Or should I tell a toddler to drive a bus? Is a thief a criminal?
Right. And these are helpful when you're doing some things that are really helpful. And again, we're going to bring in our little kitchen example here. So let's see if there's something that'll be more useful to us and relevant to what we're trying to do.
Alexa, should I drink milk if I'm lactose intolerant?
Sorry, I'm not sure about that.
Hey Google, should I drink milk if I'm lactose intolerant?
On the website milk.procon.org, they say, there is no reason for people with lactose intolerance to push themselves to drink milk. Indeed, milk and other dairy products do not offer any nutrients that cannot be found in a healthier form in other foods.
Okay, kind of. It's kind of helpful. Make the decision yourself, human. That's what it's basically telling you to do. I'll do the search for you. So there's a whole category of questions. For those of you who are like really interested in these kind of logic, conversation-related questions, this is actually something that's sort of like the basis behind trying to make the Turing test a little bit more relevant now, because there was a question. So for those of you, how many of you remember the Google Duplex demo that was out maybe like six months ago, something like that? So if you're not familiar with that, they announced at Google I/O, I think, this amazing use of the Google Assistant to make an autonomous call to a hairdresser.
To a hair salon. To a hair salon, and then they also did one to a restaurant as well, to book a reservation.
And it booked the restaurant. It booked the reservation on behalf of the human, but it had these what are called dissonances. These what do we call these disfluencies is the word. So it made it seem like that the assistant was not a bot. That it was a human who would say like things like and ah, and make these pauses and be like, what do you think
and
of it?
laughed a little.
Yeah. And so it fooled the human, right, and made the point. And everyone's like, yay! And of course, the first question for all AI researchers was like, did we just pass the Turing test? Did we just cross this threshold? Because the idea of the Turing test was to basically have a system that would fool a normal human into not knowing whether or not the machine that was communicating with them was a machine or another human, right? That's the whole idea of the Turing test. And we're like, well, did we actually cross this this defining moment in AI research? And of course, the answer is like, well, not really, because it wasn't like arbitrary questions. It was within a very defined, narrow context. And if the person on the other end of the phone decided to segue into a conversation about Coldplay, or like,
Or even maybe the weather, if it wasn't trained on that, it wouldn't be able to answer those questions or say, do they have any disabilities that we need to accommodate for, things like that. It was just, at least the demo was just on scheduling.
Right. So people are like, we need to make this Turing test a little bit more like specific, so we know whether or not these systems truly are exhibiting human-like characteristics. And there's a format of question called the Winograd schema. I encourage you to look this up. And the way that the format of the question works is that it basically has a conversation in two parts that basically has the second part referring to the first part. So for example, one question might be, Paul tried to call George on the phone, but he wasn't successful. Who wasn't successful? Right, so obviously Paul, we would know, oh, Paul, you have to figure out who the direct object was and the subject and all this sort of stuff.
Although for our benchmark, we said Paul or George were the correct answer.
Right, it could be confused as to whether or not either was either one. We'd give the machine a little bit of credit, but like if it could even like just muster like an attempt at a response, it'd be like, okay, and now they're trying to like get into these more complicated, more structural formed questions, because then you can actually have these Google Assistants interact in more complicated ways. So you're making a reservation, and the person on the other end of the reservation goes, okay, great, I can make your reservation on Wednesday, but it looks like we have another party that's booked that spot for 6 o'clock. What time would you like it? And the system will get confused to be like, well, what do you mean by like it? What are you talking about? I just lost the whole train of thought in that long sentence. Whereas a human, I guess we have some amount of short-term memory. We can retain this thought in our head for long enough to basically formulate an answer, right? So we asked it some basic questions. You might think, how do I protect? Oops, I actually don't have the video for this. But obviously they all failed miserably for this. But this one question that was asked to Siri, where it was like, how do I protect myself from rain? Which you might not think of as a Winograd schema. It is, because it's the idea of holding one thing in your head, the thought of raining, and the other thing, which is some sort of protection of, well, how do I protect myself from that thing? Siri actually got this one right. It was surprising. It was like, you should wear a raincoat or an umbrella. I'm like, oh, wow, okay. But yeah, the video from this is very uninspiring.
We also thought it was important to test on slang and colloquialism. Not everybody uses the same word to describe the same object. So we wanted to see how good they were with that. So some of the questions, it varies by culture and location, even age-based. Some people use different words for things. So a good example is soda. Some people call it pop, some people call it soda. You can also call it Coke. You're kind of all talking about the same thing, but you're using different words to describe that.
Right.
So were these able to get it? We also, when we did this, since we did have interns that were not from the United States, they didn't
get this.
Understand all of this as well.
They're like, hit the sack. I'm like, yeah, you tired?
Yeah.
Down to earth. Are you a space person? I'm like, oh my goodness. I'm sure Chinese has all sorts of expressions that we'd be like, I don't understand
why.
why.
But that just goes to show, if you speak English, you don't always understand some of those slangs.
But the important thing is we're like, well, have these devices been trained in sort of slang in addition to understanding accents? So we gave them a test. Let's see how these devices did.
Alexa, I'd like to shoot the breeze with you.
Nope.
Siri, I'd like to shoot the breeze with you.
Who, me?
Oh, not a bad one. So if you see the chart here for this one, Siri actually did really well here. Actually, there's a lot of orange responses and, of course, a bunch of red, but a whole bunch of green. So it's like, it's clear that when they designed Siri, it was meant to be much more conversational and much more have this sort of personality. I don't know how to explain it, but like it was trained to understand more of these colloquialisms, and you can have a random banter. So of course, if you gave your 3-year-old access to Alexa, Google Home, Siri, and Cortana, they would probably have the most enjoyable experience, not the most productive one, but the most enjoyable experience with Siri. Is sort of like our assessment. I don't know what that's worth, but it's worth something. All right.
So one of our last quarter categories was miscellaneous questions. So these were questions that we wanted to ask it, but didn't fall within one of the other categories, but we still thought it was important to include. So questions included what types of ticks can carry Lyme disease, how long should I cook a 14-pound turkey, general questions that are helpful.
Right, and we figured this is basically going to be like, when all the voice assistant companies come to us and say, like, you asked our devices really stupid questions and...
Or really random, random
what are you trying to do here? You're playing a trick. Like, no, we actually also asked it what we thought were, like, going to be very common questions. Like, you come in, you're, like, just outside and, like, oh, my goodness, I was bit by a tick. And you're kind of, for any of you who have been that, you're not in a position to exactly be, you're swiping on the phone because you're probably doing something trying to remove that tick. And you probably want to talk to a voice assistant at that exact moment. So we figured these are situations...
And then, like Ron brought up earlier with the turkey, if you're cooking, your hands are probably dirty and messy. You're not going to want to take out a phone. You're not going to want to be on your computer. So you're going to use your voice assistant to ask these types of questions.
So here we did.
Alexa, how long should you cook a 14-pound turkey?
I'm not sure.
Hey Google, how long should you cook a 14-pound turkey?
Here's a summary from the website HuffingtonPost.com. This table from the USDA is based on a 325 degrees Fahrenheit oven and a fully defrosted or fresh bird. We're talking roughly 15 minutes per pound. If you want to cook a frozen turkey, it will take at least 50% longer than the recommended times.
All right, well, I was wordy, but that was good. Because I'm like, those considerations did matter.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. What did we learn about Google Home and its use cases?
So we learned that Google Home was actually the best in the kitchen. So if do you guys all have either Google Home or Alexa devices? So where do you typically have them in your house? Your kitchen,
Office,
maybe a bedroom, maybe an office. So I have my devices in my kitchen, and that's where I find that I use it the most. So if you're using it for kitchen-related things, we found that Google Home was the best device for that.
So how did they do? I mean, obviously, the whole point of this was to find out kind of where the edge of their intelligence is. So obviously, we were hoping for and we were counting on a significant amount of failure. Otherwise, our questions would have been too easy. So yes, bottom line, these smart devices are not particularly smart. But here's the crazy thing. So we published this
In July of 2018.
And it got a bunch of press because we asked us we have videos, obviously, and we asked us some really funny questions. And within 2 weeks, I think we'd like to think it was coincidence, but maybe this wasn't coincidence. Amazon Alexa announced a new thing, which is called the, forgot the name of the service, where they would basically come back and for a question that they could not answer, they would come back later and say, we have the new answers for you. It's when Amazon was unsure. If it gave you a response that was a category 0 response. And maybe we nudged them to help to do this because obviously trying to minimize frustration. Since then, a lot of these devices have gotten a lot better at a lot of these questions, right?
Right, so we can tell that they're continuing to iterate on it. Another question that we did not show, but we did ask, was blending of colors. So what color is red plus blue? And back when we asked this, I don't think any device was able to understand what color you'd get if you mixed red plus blue. Since then, they now, I think at least Google Home and Alexa can get that question correct. So they are learning and they are iterating. So some of these questions, if you do ask, and you choose to do this benchmark at home, you might get different answers because they are updating it and constantly learning. But in general, we've still found that they all have a ways to go.
Right. So I think the biggest thing, obviously, for those of you that are used to these types of devices and also the AI machine learning, you know that really what we're testing is not the device. I mean, the device is just basically the gateway to accessing the AI machine learning technology that's really sitting in the cloud. And we're really testing how intelligent is Amazon, Google, Microsoft, Siri, et cetera's cloud intelligence capabilities. And they're basically getting better and better. Mm-hmm. But I think I think the thing that we highlighted to them is that like the key of intelligence is not just the ability to understand speech and to create understandings of text, and when you're building an app to create these intents that kind of key against these capabilities of speech, but to provide that higher layer, what we call machine reasoning. And machine reasoning is beyond just machine learning, because machine learning is taking patterns in data and deriving insights from data, and then using those insights, the experience, the encoded insight, to do future things. But machine reasoning requires the connection of learnings together to derive some sort of additional insight. And this is what's known, for those of you that have been in this industry for a while, this is what we've been trying to do with knowledge graphs and ontologies and all this sort of stuff. And this is the area, I would say this is kind of the cutting edge area of research, that when Amazon announced that they have 10,000 people working in their Alexa division, which was a huge surprise to us to hear that
they
had
announced
so
that
much.
about a year ago. And then recently, within the past month, it came out that there were humans listening in on conversations and parts of conversations. So we said, is that where your 10,000 employees are going?
Yeah, so we got a little bit of heat because they got upset with us for basically implying that there was what's called pseudo-AI, which is that there's a human behind, like the Wizard of Oz, there's a human behind the curtain, and there's actually a human moving the things. And there's no, we guarantee you there are no humans actually doing any of these activities, but we are using all these people to improve the model, right, and to improve the recognition. We're like, okay, I'll give you some credit for it, but over time, it's over time that has to...
the humans need to become less and less.
Right. So that was it. I'm trying to figure, when was our supposed end time? I actually didn't even keep an eye on that. Are we supposed to be out?
Sure.
What? 11:30? How are we doing?
All right. Well, we have a few minutes. We have
Yeah.
about 3 minutes.
Yeah. So obviously this is we would like to open to you. We think this is useful. I mean, obviously our job here is to push the boundaries and to make these devices more smarter. So we think that what we're doing is useful. So you have a question? Yes. Okay, so yeah, the back and forth. So we actually did a bunch of those. Actually, it's in our next iteration of the benchmark. Google has been doing quite a lot of work in sort of retaining these long form conversations, as well as Alexa and actually Cortana. It's kind of Siri that's kind of dragging far behind here, and we didn't evaluate Samsung Bixby, but it looks like both Google Home and the Amazon device are doing that. I don't know if you have any additional insights on that, but yeah, it's there's a cool tool. I'm not here. We're vendor agnostic. We don't push any tool. But how many of you are working with Dialogflow? Dialogflow, does that ring a bell? So Dialogflow is basically like a chat conversation building engine, and it's really very easy. Actually, you can create a pretty comprehensive thing. They do what's called there's something built into that called slot filling, which is a way to handle these multi-turn conversations. So you could build a chatbot and say, I want to build a scheduling chatbot. And you could say, schedule an appointment. Well, you didn't really answer a bunch of really important things like, when is the appointment, what date, that kind of thing, where, what. So what you can do is you can create these prompting systems, and the system will basically try to prompt you to get the rest of it. And so it's basically they're trying to enable you to think more in terms of multi-turn conversations. Right. Hope that helps. Yeah. Other questions? Yes. Yes. Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so we actually, we said that we would do it quarterly. We've done it a little less than quarterly, just because we want to give them a little bit more time to catch up with things. So the next one we'll be publishing fairly soon, within the next, definitely July or before. And what we also decided is that we're not going to ask it the same exact questions, but we will ask it similar style questions. Because if we ask it the same exact questions, they can get smart and code it in.
Yeah, so send us, actually, we do have a newsletter. I didn't put the newsletter link up. If you just send us an email to info@Cognilytica or team@Cognilytica, there's actually a newsletter sign up on our website. You could sign up there too, but we can put you on the specific list for distribution. It's interesting about the training for the answer. There's a reason why we asked it, how much does a pound of peas weigh? What's the reason why we asked that question?
So if you ask it, what's heavier, a ton of feathers or a ton of bricks, it gets it. It says it's the same. Well, why does it get that? But it isn't able to get, how much does a ton of peas weigh? Well, that's because it was probably hard-coded in, because that's a common, riddle that kids in the schoolyard would ask and know the answer to. So that's why we also thought that it was important to not ask the same exact questions every time, because that's not going to give you a true representation of the answers that it can provide.
And I think the other things, we may be missing entire categories of questions. So we'd like to, this is an open benchmark. So if you
Yes.
go to our website, I'm going to have to go look it up for you, but I'll pull it up here and you'll see that all the questions are actually posted online. So while I'm doing that.
Yeah, so we wanted to make this as transparent as possible, like we said. So we have all of the questions online, all of the videos online, and then the general overall report online as well. Because we encourage you guys to ask these questions, you to be benchmarking them as well, and please tell us your feedback. We always like to hear from people, if there's additional questions or categories, like Ron said, that you think we should include that we didn't in our first benchmark, let us know.
Yeah, so all the results, every single question is here. If you I just did a quick Google search for it. It's probably the fastest way even on our own website. And you'll see that it's like here's every response to every question, to every device. The charts, there's links to all the videos are in here too. So there's all the links there to all the things, and then it explains what the purpose of that category is. You can kind of see and compare. And then, of course, what we're going to do is we're going to compare year over year.
Right.
And this is an open benchmark, so that means we encourage other people to verify our results. We explain also we have the poly files that we use to generate the voice. If you see, we used poly so that people don't accuse us of having like a bad accent or
speaking too fast or trying to trick the system. So we said we're going to have it be generated.
Yeah, it's interesting because we asked Amazon. The device, the questions from the Amazon Poly, so it's kind of interesting to see that.
So better get it, better
That's the
understand.
Winograd schema, big fat red, and on pretty much almost everything. Oh, yep, that was pretty much everything. So, okay, good questions. Any other thoughts, feedback? Yep. Yes.
So it depends on categories and it depends on devices. We found that Alexa is fairly quick to update and to get better.
And Google as well.
Yeah, Google as well. I was going to say Cortana.
They're moving pretty fast. I mean, like we're not the biggest analyst firm, but like we've been getting a lot of visibility. The fellow there who's running the Alexa team, and they've now created an internal benchmarking team.
Oh yeah.
They're having frequent conversations with us.
And I think Microsoft has too after that question it didn't get right.
Right. And we tell them, it's like, look, we're not doing a ranking here. We're not saying what device is better. I mean, like, that's kind of a very abstract question. We're just saying, we're actually trying to push all the devices.
Because better is also relative. So some of these get categories of questions better. So if you're using it for that particular category, maybe that device is better. But in general, too, if you want to be multi-platform, you need to know what its limitations are.
Okay, we think we had one final question. I want to be mindful of our next speaker, I think, coming up. So, yeah.
I actually had the same question about the rate of
Oh, okay.
improvement and who looks like they're still invested in their platform and who's just kind of letting it ride.
Oh, I don't think anybody's just letting it ride.
Yeah.
They're all trying to improve because they know that they need to continue to get better.
I think the big question for us is there going to be an emergence of like some standard knowledge graph or some sort of standard thing that all these systems can inherit? That would be awesome. Of course, this is really a strategic advantage for companies to have a better knowledge graph than another one. But I think for us, this is something that we're going to keep pushing on, and we'll see. We'll do this until it all gets green or like it gets reliably red, and then we'll move on and say, okay, these devices are smart enough. So, hope that helps. All right. Well, thank you so much.